According to authenticated records, Madame Jeanne Calment is older than any person who has ever lived. Today, the birthday girl is 121 years old. But modern science suggests that one day we'll all be able to live to this age and beyond.
I don't really see why it wouldn't be possible in principle to, never die.
From the moment we're born, the clock starts ticking. After reaching a physical peak, our bodies decline. But is this inevitable? The latest research appears to offer the exciting prospect of holding back the aging process and extending our lifespan. So what exactly is aging? Professor Leonard Hayflick says we should think of what happens to our cars.
It's no different than your automobile. When you drive your car off of the showroom floor, it is hopefully in perfect condition. And after a period of time, molecular disorder occurs. And that is simply what aging is.
Like cars, our bodies are subject to molecular disorder. But we all age at different rates. And some, like Madame Calment, can stay fit and healthy well into old age. But in the end, even Madame Calment had to succumb to the one certainty in all our lives. On the 4th of August, 1997, at the age of 122, she died. Her example shows that humans are capable of living into extreme old age, but she's an exception. The diseases associated with old age, heart disease, cancer, and strokes, claim most of us long before we reach 100. The struggle to eliminate these diseases forms the front line in the battle to extend human life. London, England, at the height of the Second World War, the city was devastated by bombing raids. With stress levels at an all-time high, conventional medical wisdom would expect to see an increase in problems such as heart disease. But an American researcher, Nathan Pritikin, who was engaged in secret work for the U.S. government, uncovered some startling information.
My father was one of the inventors of the Norden bomb sight, and that allowed him to be privy to everything that was top secret during World War II. And one of the top secret things was World War II death data. Now, here's England at the height of the war, tremendous amount of stress. You would have expected heart disease to have gone up according to the prevailing theory, but in fact it dropped almost by 50%. Something else was going on.
Investigating further, Pritikin found that wartime rationing had forced the British to radically change their diet and exercise habits.
Couldn't get beef, eggs, butter. They couldn't get petrol. They had to go on a low-fat diet, and they had to walk. And it turns out that you can be stressed out of your mind, but if you're on an appropriate diet and exercise program, your rate of heart disease is going to fall. My father became fascinated with populations that were free of many of the diseases that kept us from living to our maximal lifespan.
Some information from the other side of the world intrigued Nathan Pritikin. On the Japanese island of Okinawa, the inhabitants seemed relatively free of heart disease and cancer, illnesses that plagued the Western world. Nathan Pritikin was convinced that the Okinawans enjoyed this level of health because of their unique diet. To explore this idea further, the Pritikin Longevity Center was created in Santa Monica, California. Here, diet and exercise are modified to reduce the incidence of disease and improve and lengthen life.
The food is the most important part of a long, healthy life. In our modern civilization, we have tended to concentrate the calories by taking water out of food and adding the fat. Bite for bite, food is very, very concentrated in calories. So that when you fill your stomach up on a typical diet, you bring in way too many calories. And ironically, we're undernutrition because we take away all the nutrients. So what we end up is we weigh too much and we don't have the nutrients we need to have a long, healthy life.
We all need to break our obsession with fat and change our dietary habits if we want to live longer. Fatty diets helped our ancestors survive famines, and we're still programmed to crave fat. But today's modern diet is swimming in the stuff, and doctors say that it's killing us.
This food is the types of foods that we believe will give you the longest, healthiest life. We have a mixed vegetables there. Our ancestors probably ate 13 to 14 pieces of fruits and vegetables a day. This fish is high in a type of fat called the omega-3 fatty acids, which in laboratory experiments has been shown to inhibit tumors. In human beings, it's shown to reduce the risk of heart disease. And populations like in Okinawa, where they have 10 times the chance of living to age 100 than we do here in America, with Star Wars surgery and space-age medicine, we can't get near them. This is the type of diet they eat as well.
The other component of the Pritikin regime is exercise. But we don't need to be fitness fanatics or belong to an exclusive health club to reap the benefits.
In terms of heart disease, doing as little as a half an hour walk 5 or 6 days a week significantly reduces the risk of heart disease. And if you can get to the training rates like we do here, it actually extends lifespans.
I think if I had not come, my blood pressure would have just continued to climb, my cholesterol would have continued to climb, and I'd be in very, very bad shape today. You know, I look at it like I'm adding years to my life by coming.
Doctors are finding that even small changes in lifestyle can have a profound effect on our health.
There was a study that looked at people that lived on the 3rd floor versus the 2nd floor versus the ground floor. And those that lived on the 2nd floor lived longer. Because on the 3rd floor, they took the elevator. On the 2nd floor, the elevator is so slow, they'll take the steps. Just those walking up the steps every day made a difference in lifespan.
Since starting work at the center, Harvard-trained Dr. Heather Pena has been astounded by the change she's seen in the participants.
The people that come in and already have heart disease, their angina will go away very quickly. And even I was surprised when I first started working here by how quickly we'd see a decrease in the symptoms. From a medical point of view, sometimes blood pressure drops so quickly we literally have to start decreasing their medications within a couple of days.
And it's not just heart disease and diabetes that can be alleviated. It also looks as if a healthy diet and exercise program could help to fend off some cancers.
We certainly don't make claims that we cure cancer, but again, when you look at the research, you'll find that the same things that seem to have a preventive effect on cancer are the things that we're doing here with the diet, exercise, and stress reduction.
Dr. James Barnard from UCLA tested the effects of the Pritikin diet on prostate cancer, the second leading cause of cancer death in American men. His findings proved food for thought.
If we compare men in the United States with men from Asian countries, almost no one from the Asian countries die from prostate cancer. But ironically, when they do autopsies on older Asian men, they find malignancy in the prostate in about 20% of the cases. But it just never becomes an invasive, aggressive disease. But when Asian men move to this country, then they get prostate cancer at the levels that we see in this country. So that clearly suggests that there are lifestyle factors that contribute to the development and promotion of prostate cancer.
Dr. Barnard decided to put his theory to the test. After taking serum samples from men who ate a typical American diet, he then started them on the Pritikin diet. 11 days later, a further serum sample was taken. After adding both of these to prostate cancer cells in the lab, Barnard waited to see what would happen.
In just 11 days on the Pritikin program, the growth rate of the tumor cells were reduced by 30%. It clearly indicates that if men would adopt a very low-fat, high-complex carbohydrate diet and regular aerobic exercise, they might eventually avoid the development of clinical prostate cancer.
2, alternate now for 4.
These women are doing something incredible. They're turning back their biological clocks through strength training exercise. Dr. Miriam Nelson of Tufts University has discovered that this form of exercise has amazing results for women.
Women naturally have less muscle and less bone than men do. We also live longer than men, so we need to preserve that muscle and that bone as we grow older so that we can be vibrant and independent and active for as long as possible.
As women age, they lose muscle mass, also bone density, which means they're more likely to suffer from brittle bones. But specific exercise can reverse this process.
What we've seen is that with just 2 days a week of strength training, we can gain back muscle, lose body fat, get 100 to 200% stronger, improve balance, improve bone density to decrease risk of osteoporosis, improve glucose control, reduce lipid profile to reduce your risk of heart disease.
Diet and exercise can have a real impact on the diseases and conditions that stand between us and venerable old age.
Much of typical aging is not due to aging itself, the chronological aging, but to inactivity and poor nutrition. And we firmly believe that probably at least half of the typical aging is due to those factors, and we can control those factors, which is great news for everyone.
In the early 21st century, we now expect to live longer, but those extra years aren't worth having unless we're fit and healthy enough to enjoy them.
If scientists figure out a way to extend our lives, fine. But I don't want to be extending my life with my brain in a cage, with tubes running into me. You want to have it so that you have young and vital every day of your life. And I believe that's what you can do with diet and activity. That you can get these symptoms out of the way that cause us to die prematurely and to lose our vitality prematurely. And then we can enjoy our maximal lifespan.
Clearly, diet and exercise are powerful weapons against disease. But only now is science beginning to understand how they actually slow down the aging process. When we're young, our cells easily cope with the daily barrage of tiny particles called free radicals. But over time, this bombardment takes its toll. Cells begin to die, and our bodies start to age. When our cells convert oxygen into energy, they create an unfortunate byproduct, free radicals. These highly unstable particles fly around within the cell and damage any molecule they hit, causing damage to the cell membrane or the DNA. Eventually, this can cause the cell to die. But we're not defenseless. On top of the cell's own enzyme defenses, fruits and vegetables contain antioxidants, such as vitamin C and vitamin E, which neutralize free radicals. By including these foods in our diet, we can slow the aging process. And if there's one food worth developing a taste for, it's blueberries. Scientists at Tufts University, Boston, have found that they're the best antioxidants around. In tests on rats, they've even been shown to reverse age-related problems like loss of memory, poor balance, and bad coordination. Former athlete Mark Sisson has made it his quest to age really gracefully. To stay in good physical and mental shape, he recognizes the importance of introducing antioxidants into his body. For him, the answer is nutritional supplements, which he believes have anti-aging properties.
We all suffer from oxidative damage. We all suffer from the damage of taking in oxygen, using it to fuel ourselves and our cells, but there's fallout, there's free radical damage. So if we can reverse this damage, or at least stop this damage, by using things like antioxidants, then we can extend the useful life of the cell and allow the cell to make the repairs that it needs to make and regenerate healthy.
Mark decided to develop a series of nutritional supplements that would mop up free radicals and provide him with all the essential vitamins and minerals his body needs. To remain physically and mentally vital, Mark combines this daily intake of nutritional supplements with exercise.
To some degree, it is possible to reverse the aging process. I will, however, tell you that first and foremost, exercise is critical to that whole component. People should realize that there is no fountain of youth without movement and without exercise. Movement is one of the very things that defines us, and when we stop moving, we stop living. My quest is not to extend the lifespan past the theoretical 122 years, but to extend the useful lifespan so that you're active and enjoying those 120 years to the fullest extent.
Mark Sisson dreams of staying fit and healthy into extreme old age. And if he can dream, why shouldn't we? Maybe there is a way for all of us to look forward to a longer, fuller life, rather than a slow physical and mental decline.
One more breath, stretching through your whole body, heels forward, fingers back. On the inhale, again, moving into Dr.
These seniors are being taught yoga, but it's not just for their physical well-being, believes Dr. Marjorie Silver.
What people are not aware of is that exercising your brain is just as important. And the key is new learning. Every time that you learn something new, your brain builds new connections between the brain cells. And it also strengthens pathways between various parts of the brains that need to communicate. So you develop a much stronger communication network within your brain.
Gaze down into your fingertips. This is where you return to yourself.
I'm 83. I was 83 August 26th. I started college at age 52, and then I got my bachelor degree, my master's, and then finally my PhD, which is what I wanted.
It is possible to have a rich, fulfilling life well into our 80s or even 90s. But why are some people able to go even further and enjoy an extra 20 or 25 years of life? Harry Shapiro is 101. Painting every day, he believes his longevity is more down to art than science.
I'm so immersed in what the artists have done in the history of the world. I'm so in love with what I've seen of Rembrandt and Michelangelo, Da Vinci and Tintoretto and Tiziano. I go crazy about art, that's all I know. It brightens my day, brightens my years, it overwhelms me. But there's something ennobling about painting. You take a subject on this earth and you transform it into a work of art. You've transmitted something beyond the thing that's going to die. You've made it imperishable in a sense. I've made a lot of paintings that my in-laws, my daughters have in their homes. Portraits, landscapes, still life. And these have helped me to come to the year 101. I'm sure about it.
But maybe there's more to it than Harry's healthy lust for life. Dr. Tom Pearls of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, Boston, has been studying centenarians to find out what really makes them special.
We had this idea that to get to 100, you had to age very slowly and either markedly delay or escape diseases associated with aging. A couple of things certainly were common among the centenarians. Very few, if any of them, ever smoked. Significant obesity was very rare, if non-existent, among this group. Beyond those things, we weren't seeing some of the things we were hoping to see, whether it be some special diet or exercises. One thing that they did have a lot in common was an awful lot of brothers and sisters also getting to very old age.
Armed with this clue, Dr. Pearls dug deeper. Maybe the key to longevity lies in the genes that centenarians share in common with each other.
And lo and behold, it does appear that on a specific chromosome, there is a region that they do have in common.
Isolating these genes is an immense task, but scientists are getting closer to finding them. When they do, the mystery of why centenarians age more slowly will unravel.
For the average bunch of us, we probably have some amazing set of genes that allow us to, most of us, to get to our mid to late 80s in excellent health. But to live the extra 20 to 25 years beyond that of more good health, I would wager you need these genetic booster rockets.
So is the age at which we die predetermined by our genes? Without these genetic booster rockets, is there nothing we can do to increase our lifespan and avoid the diseases of old age? Pearl's work offers us all hope.
Once you note the biochemical pathways that those genes or gene regulates to give them that big survival advantage, you all of a sudden have these tremendous drug targets where you can perhaps develop a drug that would allow other people to at least become more centenarian-like. And if they're predisposed to these diseases, to give them this drug when they're young so that they never develop them as they get older.
So if we all take regular exercise, eat well, and maybe in the future take advantage of genetic booster rockets, we might, like Madame Calment, enjoy the longest recorded human lifespan of 122. But science is now discovering that this venerable age need not be the limit of our expectations. What is it that causes us to age? Once scientists understand that, then maybe they can begin to prevent it. Back in 1962, Dr. Leonard Hayflick discovered that our cells die not because of their age, but because they can only divide a finite number of times. This became known as the Hayflick Limit.
I think that our work has demonstrated not that there is a clock in cells, because a clock is an instrument that records the passage of time. We always knew from the experiments that we did that the limitation was a function of the number of divisions that the cell underwent, independent of time.
Professor Hayflick discovered that this counting mechanism existed in the nucleus of the cell, but it would be another 20 years before scientists could demonstrate how this mechanism worked and caused cellular death. Inside every cell at the end of our chromosomes is a piece of DNA called a telomere. It stops the DNA from fraying as it divides. But every time the cell divides, the telomere gets shorter. Eventually, the telomere shortens to a critical length. The next time the cell divides, the telomere is powerless to prevent the DNA from fraying, and the cell dies. And when cells die, we begin to age. However, one cell that manages to maintain its telomeres is able to divide over and over again. It is, in effect, immortal. Cancer. The question that baffled scientists was why. Dr. Calvin Harley of Giron explains how it was solved.
In cancer cells, which are immortal and somehow escape the Hayflick phenomenon, we discovered that they have the enzyme that is responsible for maintaining telomeres without shrinkage.
This enzyme, called telomerase, has the ability to add a little bit of DNA onto the end of the chromosome. So as cancer cells divide and the chromosome shortens, telomerase compensates by adding a little bit back on. At the Southwestern Medical Center, University of Texas, two eminent cell biologists, Professor Woodring Wright and Professor Jerry Shea, took what they thought was the next logical step. they decided to introduce the enzyme telomerase into normal cells to see if they could immortalize them. But would this merely turn the healthy cells into cancer? These are young, healthy cells that have divided 23 times. They're long and spindly. As they get older and their telomeres shorten, they become bigger and flatter.
Right here is the outline of a single cell. See how big that is? And there's the nucleus.
Wright and Shea's laboratory introduced telomerase into cells in the Petri dish and then waited. The results were remarkable. Not only did the cells have telomerase expressed in them, but they carried on dividing while still maintaining the appearance of young cells.
So here is the outline of one cell, and you can see the nucleus right here. Here is the outline of a second cell. You can see that the cells tend to be spindle-shaped, elongated. That contrasts to the just big, flat pancake appearance of the old senescent cells.
Wright and Shea had succeeded in creating an immortal human cell.
When we introduced telomerase into those cells, we essentially put cellular aging on hold.
Still dividing, the cells are normal, healthy, and show no signs of developing cancer.
Some of these cells have been in continuous culture now for 2.5 years. They've exceeded their lifespan from, let's say, 60 to now close to 500 population doublings, and other laboratories have confirmed this.
This discovery means we may be on the brink of a revolution. It may transform the way we treat diseases in the future, helping us to live longer, healthier lives.
There's a whole list of disorders where one might begin to think about removing a single cell or a few cells from a patient, rejuvenating them in the laboratory by introducing telomerase, re-elongating the telomeres, and then giving the person back their own cells.
While introducing telomerase into our cells makes them more youthful, we may soon have the ability to remove telomerase from cancer cells and therefore stop them from spreading.
I think it's important to recognize that our ability to treat cancer is undergoing a revolution. I would be totally astounded if 15 years from now our ability to deal with cancer is not totally transformed.
The research into telomerase opens up a whole new approach to cancer treatment. So in our lifetimes, we could arrest many cancers. The discovery of an immortal cell might also impact upon many of the other age-related conditions which affect millions of people all over the world. Who knows just how far these discoveries could take us? One factor has already been proven to extend life. Since the 1930s, it's been known that if you restrict food intake in rats and mice, but ensure they receive sufficient nutrients, they'll live 30 to 40% longer than normal. As scientists began to wonder whether this might work for humans too, a lucky accident provided some answers. In 1991, Professor Roy Walford and 7 colleagues were the guinea pigs in an unusual experiment to see if humans could be self-sufficient in outer space. In the middle of the Arizona desert, they were sealed inside a glass enclosure called Biosphere 2, cut off from all physical contact with the outside world. Professor Walford had long been interested in caloric restriction. He was now about to inadvertently put his theories to the test on his fellow inmates.
The Biosphere 2 experiment I didn't intend to make that a calorie restriction experiment in humans. When I got in, though, and we were sealed in, we found, for various reasons, that we couldn't raise enough food.
Able to raise only 1,800 calories per person a day, the crew members had to decide whether to bring in food from outside. For the average person, 1,800 calories per day would be pretty miserable. The empty calories contained in junk food would have to be substituted for nutritionally dense fruits and vegetables. For the crew members who were involved in intense physical work, surviving on 1,800 calories a day would be difficult. But unwilling to compromise the experiment, they said no to outside help.
So I recognized that this was an opportunity to study calorie restriction in humans. It wasn't planned, though, ahead of time.
Professor Walford oversaw the food supply, ensuring that everyone got a balanced diet and all the nutrients they needed. But there was one problem he couldn't manage: the constant feeling of hunger. As Professor Walford carefully monitored his colleagues' health, he saw some remarkable changes. Cholesterol was reduced, blood pressure lowered, even insulin levels went down. In short, everyone's health improved.
What we found in terms of my experiment was that individuals react on calorie restriction exactly the same as rodents.
So, if calorie restriction improves health, could it lengthen life? While it's possible to study rodents through their entire lives, experimenting with humans is a different matter. Instead of waiting 100 years for human data, scientists have returned to rodents to try and find out exactly what happens when calories are restricted. Professor Richard Weindruck at the University of Wisconsin is studying caloric restriction in mice. The mice on one side of the room are enjoying a normal diet. Those on the other side, more meager rations with 30% fewer calories.
So basically, these kinds of diets in this particular breed of mouse will lead to roughly a 30% increase in both the average lifespan and the maximum lifespan. Average lifespan for these animals is about 30 months, and for these, roughly 40 months or so.
The puzzle was, why should caloric restriction make animals live longer? Professor Weindruck knew that as animals age, different genes switch on or off, a process known as gene expression. Weindruck's challenge was to identify all the genes that changed with age. It seemed an impossible task until some new technology came to the rescue. This DNA chip allowed Professor Weindruck to read gene activity. Instead of looking at one gene at a time, he could analyze the activity of 6,347 genes, all of which threw new light on the aging process within his animals. With his team being fed huge amounts of data, Professor Weindruck started to compare the way in which the genes expressed themselves in the two groups of mice. As he expected, the most active genes in the older animals were those involved in molecular damage. But when he compared this data to the reading taken from calorie-restricted animals of the same age, he was in for a shock.
The real amazing time for us is about a week later when we got the data, and we learned that about 70% of these changes occurring with aging were selectively being picked off one at a time and reversed or completely stopped by caloric restriction.
Professor Weindruck's mice were enjoying significantly longer and healthier lifespans, and he was able to see just why. Caloric restriction was correcting many of the genetic changes that occur in normal aging, effectively putting the whole process on hold. The mice were living a third longer. Imagine if the same result occurred in humans. it would mean caloric restriction could extend our lives by 30 to 40 years, and not just 30 to 40 extra years of old age, but 30 to 40 years spread through our lifespan. But it's a big jump from mice to men. Can caloric restriction really work in humans? To answer this crucial question, scientists began studying an animal closer to man, the primate. Rhesus macaque monkeys became the chosen species. They're well adapted to the laboratory and live for an average of 20 years, an ideal subject to study. Some scientists believe that if their lives are extended by caloric restriction, it should also work for humans. For 12 years, the National Institute on Aging at the NIH has been studying these monkeys. Those on the left are fed a normal diet, those on the right a calorie-restricted one. Dr. Mark Lane explains.
You can see that their growth is not stunted. They don't appear emaciated. It's not a starvation kind of nutritional intervention, but they're actually fed a nutritionally replete or complete diet to get all the vitamins and minerals that they need. They are somewhat smaller. They do weigh less and have less body fat. And many indices of health are improved in the monkeys on calorie restrictions on the right compared to these guys on the left. Calorie restriction is the only intervention that reproducibly extends both average and maximal lifespan. And therefore, we think it has a fundamental biological effect on aging processes and not just improvements in health that retard age-related diseases.
Doctors Ingram and Lane believe that caloric restriction is affecting the animal's metabolism. It's as if the body is being deceived into thinking that there's a famine. In response, it tells cells to process less energy, saving the body for better times ahead.
So there's a shift from growth and development into survival or life maintenance kind of strategies for survival.
So far, 10 monkeys on the normal diet have died, compared to only 4 of the calorie-restricted animals. At the National Institute on Aging, these results are seen as a powerful indication that the monkeys on calorie-restricted diets will enjoy significantly longer average and maximum lifespans.
The imposition of this caloric restriction regime looks like the response that we have observed in rodent models. They have responded in virtually identical ways. And what that does for us is to show that this response is a fairly universal phenomenon in mammalian species.
So should the Biosphere crew start planning for a longer life? Perhaps not. After they left the experiment, most of the crew members returned to their former eating habits. However, Professor Walford stuck to his calorie-restricted diet. He's convinced that he's onto something, the secret to a longer life.
I feel much better when I'm on the diet. I need less sleep. My head is clear. The only problem is a certain amount of hunger. You have to accept that. Generally, it varies very much with the individual. Some people, when they try to do the diet, are just famished, and others don't feel much hunger at all. I feel a little hunger, but it's well worth the benefits.
Professor Walford's daughter, Lisa, is also a convert. But as any Weight Watcher knows, cutting calories and avoiding malnutrition is no easy feat. As every calorie needs to be nourishing, preparing food takes a lot of thought. So the Walfords have designed a computer program to help.
I've entered all the foods that are included in this evening's meal, and then I will go and take a look at the nutritional profile of tonight's meal. And I can see the number of calories, 461 calories. You'll see how much food that can be. I can also identify that I'm a little bit low in this meal on calcium, on selenium, which is an antioxidant, and on iron. And then ask the program what foods from those categories it recommends that I add. Brazil nuts, for instance. 1 Brazil nut a day will give you as much selenium as you need for that day. 1 Brazil nut.
So, according to the 76-year-old Professor Walford, what might be the benefit of years of calorie counting?
If you could deal with the human population beginning calorie restriction at about 20 years of age, you would get a maximum lifespan of about 165 or 167, and an average lifespan of about 140.
So these teenagers could live for 167 years. But there's a catch. No burgers, no fries, no cola, just a constant hungry feeling. However, scientists are beginning to think that there just might be a way for us to have our cake and eat it. At the Gerontology Research Center at the National Institute on Aging, Professor George Roth and his colleagues believe that processing the food we eat causes us to age.
We believe that aging is a form of biological disordering. We go from a very ordered state when we're young to a disordered state when we get older. That is due largely, we think, to the processing of energy. And there's probably only a finite amount of reserve capacity in any organism. The faster that we burn up that energy, the faster we're going to burn our candle out.
Professor Roth is testing this theory using rats.
These are 12-month-old animals of the Fisher strain, and you can see they're quite healthy and moderate amount of fat on the animal. And these are our control animals for the study. Okay. Now, in addition, we have a rat of approximately the same age, 12 months of age, over here, who has been given approximately 30% less food. He's considerably smaller than the other animal, probably about 20% lighter in body weight. But interestingly, this guy is healthier and he'll live longer. He'll live probably 4 or 5 months longer because of the fact that he's taking in less calories.
But there's a third rat, and it's the most intriguing of all. It shows all the usual signs of being on a calorie-restricted diet, and yet it eats the same diet as the control rat.
The third group of animals are being given a sugar called 2-deoxyglucose. This is our caloric restriction mimetic candidate compound. It's a variation of the sugar glucose, which is the one that we get most of our energy supply from. And he's very similar in size to the control animals that we saw over here. His body weight is perhaps 5% lower at the most. Yet, biologically, he is a lot more similar to the calorically restricted animal because he has lower levels of insulin circulating in his blood, and he has a lower body temperature, which are two of the most important metabolic hallmarks of the calorically restricted state, and we think are related to the generally better health and longer lifespan.
The 2-deoxyglucose compound blocks those enzymes that process energy, so the rat cells are fooled into thinking that energy is scarce.
The cells of this animal, they're being tricked into thinking that they're calorically restricted, that they're energy restricted. So this is a way, we think, to slow the rate of biological disordering over time because less energy is being processed from the glucose, the major energy source.
A pill that lets us enjoy the benefits of a calorie-restricted diet is now a distinct possibility. Could we soon be eating whatever we like and living to the ripe old age of 167 years?
We are now honing in on, I believe, what is the biological mechanism that leads to lifespan extension by caloric restriction. And we even have some pathways that we can target to manipulate and try and mimic that effect.
While scientists at the National Institute on Aging are several years away from a safe pill for humans, they believe that it will be developed within their lifetimes. it would be an astonishing accomplishment. If the scientists are correct, this would mean that everybody will have access to medication to extend their lifespan by a third. For the first time, lifespan extension would become a reality. But while some think the fountain of youth will come in a convenient pill-shaped form, others think the key to immortality lies in these unprepossessing creatures. C. elegans, the nematode worm. Professor Cynthia Kenyon explains.
I realized that it might be possible to study aging in this little worm C. elegans because it really gets old. It only takes it 2 weeks to get old. It only has a 2.5-week lifespan.
The worm's lifespan is regulated by hormones that are switched on and off by genes.
There must be genes in the DNA that control aging in some way. And if you change these genes, you should be able to change lifespan.
So Professor Kenyon set about changing the worm's genes.
You take the little worms and you treat them with something that damages their genes and changes them. And then what you do is you look in the descendants of those animals for a worm that is different from normal. And this worm is what we call a mutant.
She focused her attention on one group of mutant worms. In these worms, a gene called DAF2 had been changed, and something miraculous was happening. On their first day of life, the mutant worms behaved like normal worms. By day 7, the normal worms were showing signs of age, but the mutants still appeared young and active. By day 13, the normal worms were in the last stages of life, yet the mutants were still going strong. In effect, they had doubled their lifespan.
They don't just live longer, they stay young longer. In fact, if I were one of these animals, then I could be 90 years old. It's as if a person that looks and thinks and feels just like me is 90 years old.
The mutant worms lived longer because the function of the broken gene, DAF2, had changed.
And that tells us that the normal function that this gene has is to make the worms grow old. Can you imagine that? Genes in the animal making it get old. Genes that are kind of working against the animal.
Spurred on, Professor Kenyon manipulated other genes and made the worms live longer and longer. Could gene manipulation in humans produce similar results? It's yet to be established if specific genes control how long we live.
It seems like we can keep doing things to these worms that can continue to double their lifespan again and again. It makes you wonder what the limit is, you know? If we're like worms, then we have a bright future.
Discovering that a gene can control how long this creature lives is a remarkable achievement. But knowing that we can extend life by gene manipulation brings the holy grail of immortality within our grasp. If the human organism is already robust enough to last 70 or 80 years, with gene manipulation, could we really live forever?
I don't really see why, with just tweaking the system a little more, it wouldn't be possible in principle to, never die. I don't know.
As scientists delve deeper into the mysteries of human aging, there are even more revelations and discoveries to come. And who knows, in the future, someone celebrating their 122nd year could be the youngest person at their birthday party.